And before we begin, I'll mention, as we do on most of, or if not all of our programs, if there are any questions or comments that come up during the presentation, please feel free to chat them to any of the rabbis, and Rabbi Kornbluth will address any questions. He's told me he's here. He's happy to address. It's early Friday morning in Israel, so I think he has a number of hours to go till Shabbos. So he's ready to stay on as long as any questions need to be addressed. So once again, welcome everyone. Good evening. We're joined here, Chabad of South Bay, Chabad of Northridge, Chabad of Red Rock in Las Vegas, and Chabad of Granada Hills are here for a very important and informative discussion tonight: cremation or burial. This is brought to you in connection with the Jewish Learning Institute, the current course that we're teaching called The Journey of the Soul. And it's definitely an appropriate topic that connects with this, with the ideas that we've been learning in the JLI during this course. I want to mention that before we begin tonight, tonight's event has been sponsored by the Roth family, by Ted and Rhonda Roth, in memory of their son, Jacob Roth, whose first yahrzeit is approaching in the next few days. Jacob was Yaakov Ephraim, a kind, sweet young man who grew up in our community here in the South Bay. Just a beautiful person, a beautiful individual who was tragically taken from us at a young age last year, and his yahrzeit is coming up in a few days, and tonight's learning is in his memory. We're joined tonight, or as I said, early morning, from Israel with Rabbi Doron Kornbluth. Doron is a renowned international speaker. He's an international best-selling author of numerous books, and he is really an expert on the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight, the topic of burial versus cremation. And he spent years talking to experts, examining realities on the ground, the philosophies behind burial and cremation. He's wrote a book on it, and tonight he's going to share some of his time with us to discuss this important topic. And as I mentioned, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to chat them to any of the rabbis or to Doron himself. He said you can chat him questions as well, and he will try to address them. So without further ado, let's give your attention to Rabbi Doron Kornbluth.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. Maybe we can just do a quick test. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. So nice. Okay, great. Hi, California. How y'all doing? Nice to see you. Nice to see you, rabbis. Nice to see you, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi, as you mentioned, I am speaking to you from Israel. It is now 5:30 a.m. And I discovered something recently in the world of Zoom talks. You know, I used to travel around the world speaking, and now it's all on Zoom. So you know that saying that that dog is man's best friend? Everybody hear that saying, dog is man's best friend, right? I've discovered it's not true. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee is man's best friend. It is 5:30 a.m. I am raring to go, fully caffeinated, so I look forward to spending a little time together. The subject that we're going to talk about is indeed a little uncomfortable. I once heard a story about this older gentleman. He says to his wife, "Honey, come sit in the bed beside me for a minute, please." Kind of strange request. So she sits beside him. He says, "Honey, remember when we were in our 20s and I broke my leg and you were there with me?" "Yes, honey, I was." "Remember when we were in our 40s and I went bankrupt and you were there with me?" "Yes, honey, I was." "And remember when we were in our 50s and I had my heart attack and you were there with me?" "Yes, honey, I was." So he says, "Well, I have something important to tell you." And a tear rolls down her cheek and she leans in. He says, "Honey, you're bad luck." I mean, there are some subjects that just seem like they're bad luck. We don't want to talk about them. We don't want to deal with them. Certainly death, burial, cremation, like who needs it? It's kind of taboo. A comedian once said, I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve it through not dying. Like, we prefer not talking about this kind of stuff. But it's important to talk about it. When we were kids, looking around the screens over here, when we were kids, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the percentage of Americans who were being cremated when they died was very low. Percentage of Jews was low single digits. As of today, overall American statistic, it's over 55% today of the American dead are being cremated. And Jews are not that far behind. We're not at 55%, but it is tremendously high. We don't know for sure exactly how many American Jews are being cremated, what the exact percentage is, but I will give you an estimate. About 10 years ago, Rabbi Elchanan Zone from New York, did an informal study, and he found that in Jewish funeral homes, about 20% of the requests, over 20% of the requests, were for cremations. Did you get those caveats, by the way? That's 10 years ago. That's in New York, the more culturally Jewish part of the country. And that is people who actually choose a Jewish funeral home at over 20% of the requests. Never mind the mass numbers of people who are not connected choose a non-denominational funeral home or no funeral home. So there's no doubt that the national rate of cremation amongst American Jewish dead is 1/3 now, and is probably significantly higher in many parts of the country. So my question for you is why? What I love about Zoom is that it's incredibly interactive, actually. You have a chat box. For me, it's on the bottom of my screen. I don't know where it is for you. You can chat to everyone. And I'd like you to tell me why people today, all types, Christians, Jews, whatever, in America, are choosing cremation more than ever before. When I was a kid, very small percentage. Today, the norm. You tell me why. We're going to do 3 things together tonight. We're going to discuss the reasons why people are choosing cremation. We're going to analyze them. We're then going to get into the reasons that Jews have favored burial historically. And then we're going to get to questions and comments at the end. So Limor is saying environmental reasons. People want to save the planet. Absolutely. Money. Somebody's saying money. Financial reasons. Thank you. Less expensive. Several people are saying less expensive. Absolutely. We're going to talk about it. Environmental waste of land, right? That's a different environmental point. Ecological reasons. Good. So far we have financial reasons and environmental reasons. Misinformation and conformity. Absolutely. Definitely there. The money sign, Steve. Thanks. I appreciate your shorthand over there. Less expensive. Jews are assimilated, so to speak, don't have connection to Judaism, right? Just kind of follow what people are doing. Like the urn, like to have the urn with them. That's a very good point. Thank you. Thank you, Scott and Lisa. And okay, you guys, I'm impressed. California, you're getting and Vegas, right? So you're getting the top 10 pretty quickly over here. It's pretty ignorance of Jewish tradition. Very good. Easier to choose, seems quick and easy, right? Families want to be together, right? In the old country, you had a family plot, and this is a new way of trying to do that. So last minute, cremation is easy, right? If we put in our thought, then we are giving them that option instead of teaching why we should not. In other words, it's an option today. I think what Tilly is saying, it's like, it just seems like an option instead of it just being not even a thought. Very good. Okay, you guys did great. Thank you. If anything else, you're welcome to type it in. But you hit the main ones pretty quickly. That's great. It's funny. I used to speak, Rabbi Rivkin from Northridge, and I go back a long time. I've the privilege of being there many times. And so historically, what Jamie's saying because they have tattoos and can't be in a Jewish cemetery. Very interesting. We'll talk about that. Remind me to tell you what my grandmother said about that. I'll get to it later. So what I have always focused on, I've been in education in some form for over 20 years, and I was never into this subject. I wrote a book called Raising Kids to Love Being Jewish, and I speak to parents and grandparents about keeping their families Jewish. I spoke to your Hebrew school, I remember the Sunday morning, and I speak about why be Jewish. I speak about relationships and marriage, happiness, all this kind of stuff. I'm kind of a positive, I try and be a positive kind of a guy. And I was never into, the burial subject. It always seemed kind of gross and morbid, right? But now it's the number one request that I get as a first talk with the community is burial and cremation. It is extremely common. I'm speaking on Zoom at least once a week about burial and cremation to different communities around the world. And the reasons that people give when I ask this question about why people today, Christians, Jews, whatever, why Westerners are choosing cremation, it's exactly what you listed, remarkably consistent. This is what my research found. I wrote a book on the subject, Cremation or Burial, A Jewish View. It came out in 2012. My research and my experience in speaking, this is exactly what people say. So let's go through your reasons and we're going to analyze them. We're going to see that some of these reasons that people choose cremation are stronger than others. Okay, number one, you start with the environment. I am a big environmentalist. I love hiking outdoors, and it means a lot to me. I grew up that way, and I teach my kids that way. And there's two big environmental critiques, environmental subjects that are in terms of burial and cremation. You mentioned both of them in your chat. Number one is the amount of land that is used, and number two is what goes into the land. They're related, but they're separate, right? One is how much is wasting the land, and the other is what you're putting into the land. So let's do with the amount of land. The argument goes like this. We have a limited amount of land. We have a growing population. We are gradually running out of land. And if you're a good person, why would you want to waste land on a dead body that doesn't need it? Leave it for the birds and the trees and playgrounds. It's a very moral argument, actually, right? What do Jews say when we have a drink? L'chaim, right? Living takes precedence. The only problem is that I ran the numbers. I'm not the first person to run the numbers, but I did run the numbers. Since my book came out in 2012 and giving hundreds of talks, I've never been challenged once in the numbers because I believe they are inarguable. I'm not going to bore you with stats. I will give you one statistic right now. If every American who died, and I'm only speaking to the Jewish community, 1.6% of the population, right? But if every American who died, it's about 3 million Americans a year die, right? Thank God there's more births and immigration, so the population goes up. But about 3 million died last year, obviously, unfortunately, was higher than normal, right? If every American who died were to be buried, it would take, get this, it would take 10,000 years to use up 1% of America's landmass. That's if every American who died, it would take 10,000 years to use up 1% of America's landmass. There is plenty of land. There is no issue. You do not have to choose between land is for the living and land is for the dead. True, if you want to be buried in downtown LA or Manhattan or downtown Miami, you've got a problem. Land is at a premium. But how often do you go to a cemetery? I mean, if you're going every day, that's probably too much, guys. I don't think it's meant for that, right? You can't go out 30 minutes or 60, within half an hour or 1 hour of every metropolitan area in North America. And it's true in South America, and Europe, and Africa, and Asia, and it's true in Australia. By the way, this is only not true to my knowledge in Hong Kong and Singapore, and there are solutions there. But there is plenty of land. By the way, if you doubt me, okay, next time you fly, remember when we were allowed to fly? When the plane takes off, look down. There's a ton of land. There's no issue whatsoever. Within 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you don't have to be buried in Wyoming. In California, within an hour of your house, there's plenty of land. That is not an issue. By the way, serious environmentalists do not even mention the issue of how much land. Burial is actually open areas where there is air movement, where there's green. It's not an issue, right? Cremation companies mention this because they want your money, but that's not a real issue. The real environmental issue is not about the amount of land. There's plenty of land, no issue, no problem. The real environmental issue is what gets put into the land. And this is legitimately a big one. Two main problems. Problem number one, metal caskets. A tremendous amount of metal is put into the ground every day with every burial that happens. You have to make the metal, form it, you put it into the ground. It rusts for hundreds of years. a legitimate environmental disaster. Number 2, embalming. Forgive me, this is a talk about burial and cremation, so I'm sure you realize that some things wouldn't be so pleasant. If you don't know what an embalming is, it's pretty simple. They remove the liquids, basically the blood, replace it with chemicals, preservatives. Formaldehyde is still the #1 choice for most funeral homes, right? It keeps the body a little bit longer. The body still decomposes. It just lasts longer, right? The US embalms much more than any other country, right? I mean, the antecedents are in Egypt, where the pharaohs were, in a way, were embalmed. But it's really the US that embalms more than anyone, starting the Civil War, sending the boys back up north. And the main, it's terrible for the environment. Gallons and gallons of toxic chemicals being put into the body and then seeping into the ground. So 2 very legitimate, serious environmental problems with modern burials, right? Anybody notice the commonality of these 2 things? Rabbis, you are not allowed to answer this question. What do these 2 facets have in common? Metal caskets and embalming. Anyone know? Thank you very much. I see in the chat. We don't do them. Judaism insists on simple wood caskets. Pine is the wood of choice, clear, biodegradable. By the way, here in Israel, they carry the body to the grave in a casket, but the body is actually put naturally into the ground with no casket, just in burial shrouds. They reuse the caskets here, actually. It's kind of interesting, right? In most places, you actually need to, the municipality or the custom is that you need wooden caskets to be buried. Biodegradable, they put a few holes on the bottom, right? So that the body, ashes to ashes, goes back to the earth. So we don't do the metal casket thing. Embalming, we most certainly don't do, right? Considered a desecration of the body. If you wonder why that would be, and if you have a masochistic streak in you, after this talk, go on YouTube and watch an embalming. You will understand in about 10 seconds why we don't do it, okay? It's an awful thing, right? So Jewish burial has always been considered a model of environmentalism. Environmentalists are not in favor of cremation. Cremation uses a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. Just think about it for a second. We're all getting rid of our gas-guzzling cars, and we're buying Teslas and electric vehicles, and suddenly you're using all this energy, fossil fuels, to burn up bodies. It's tremendous waste of gas and terrible for the environment, the carbon footprint. Right? And furthermore, cremation releases toxic chemicals into the air. If you're like my age and older, which many of us are, and if you have a filling in your teeth, you've got a filling in your teeth, you probably have mercury in your mouth. For younger people, by the way, they don't do cavities with mercury anymore. But our generation and older, they did. And when they cremate, they're releasing mercury into the air, and it's really bad for the environment. Many municipalities have a rule that you're not allowed to build a crematorium beside a school. Ask yourself why. By the way, close to home, you guys are in Southern California, most of you. LA, in the LA Times, about 2 weeks ago, there was a big article, maybe 3 weeks ago, there was a big article that the municipality relaxed the rules on the ovens, on crematoriums, because there is a serious problem of air pollution from crematoriums. They have a maximum number of bodies they're allowed, but because of the current crisis, there's bodies waiting in the hallways. So they relaxed the rules to allow them go against the air pollution rules temporarily to cremate more bodies. Meaning, cremation is pollution. It's a law. Okay, it's not me saying it. Google it. Where environmentalists are not in favor of cremation. It uses fossil fuels. It releases chemicals into the air. They are in favor of what's called green burial. Green burial essentially means no metal caskets, no embalming, and how you design the cemetery, right, should be done in accordance with proper environmental standards, many of which are and some aren't. There's all different types, and they're getting better. So the idea that we should care about the environment, 100%, I'm very into it, right? And burial, Jewish burial is the model and is the way to go. Okay, next, few people mentioned visiting the the grave. So in the old country, so to speak, there would be a family plot, generation after generation, and on the yard site or Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever, for the holidays, people would go. Today, you got the grandparents in the Northeast, and you got the grandkids, and you got the kids in the West Coast, and you got the grandkids in the, in Florida. Like, nobody's going to visit. Nobody lives there. People say, where am I going to be buried? Here? I don't have any kids here. There. Who knows how long they're going to be there? So why bother having a grave? Or maybe your kids, grandkids are not so traditional. They don't visit graves. So the thinking is, why bother having a grave? Just take the reins with me. So I want to test your Jewish knowledge, and we'll see what you think. In a previous life before COVID, my side job was a tour guide. I'm a licensed tour guide. I take families around and communities around the country. Here in Israel, I go to Poland as well. If this ever ends, you're welcome to come and be in touch. True or false, ladies and gentlemen? True means thumbs up. False, give me a thumbs down. True or false? My favorite place to bring tourists in Israel is the grave of Moses, the Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. True, it's my favorite place, ladies and gentlemen. My favorite place in Israel. False, it's not. Stella says true. Michael says not. Shanzi's saying true. Bernardo's saying true. By the way, it looks good. I don't know what you're eating, but the chopsticks were making me hungry before, and it's only 5 a.m., which is kind of weird. I see true, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, I see Steve is saying false. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it was a trick question, guys. I'm sorry. I just got to have fun. It's early in the morning. Moses is not buried in Israel. Remember the end of the Bible? He never makes it in, right? Martin Luther King Jr., his famous thing about going up the mountain, looking into the promised land. He's using the imagery of the end of the Bible, that Moses goes up the mountain and is allowed to look in. He's not buried here. He's in the present country of Jordan, right? Furthermore, we don't know where he's buried. God hid the place of his burial because it was such a concern that he was such a great prophet that people would start to think of him as some kind of a god. So God hid the place of his burial. Now, 3,300 years ago, when Moses died, we know there was cremation. Archaeologically, we know it was the norm. Yet God did not choose cremation. He chose burial. And think about it. Has anyone ever visited the grave of Moses? Ever knowingly visited the grave of Moses? And the answer is no. And yet, God chose burial. Because we, in our modern minds, we combine two things: having a grave and visiting a grave. And we assume if no one's going to visit the grave, either they live far away, they're not traditional, they don't visit graves, then why bother having one? But one of the most famous burials in history in the Bible, there's two famous burials in the Bible, right? The really famous ones. Abraham buries Sarah at the beginning, and at the end, God buries Moses. It teaches us that these two things are not related. If you like visiting graves, you can visit a grave. It's great. I actually like visiting graves. I connect to it somehow. Don't worry, I don't go every day. I'm not a weirdo. But like, I'm originally from Montreal. When I go back and visit, if it's not the deep winter, I visit the family plot, and it means something to me. You can go. You don't have to go. There's no obligation. But it has nothing to do with whether or not the body deserves a grave and should get a grave. Moses proves it. By the way, people think that cremated remains, help with mobility. I mean, just think about it for a second, right? So the parents pass, right? And the kids have 2 urns. Next generation has 4 urns. Next generation has 8 urns. Next generation has 16 urns. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but like, you get the point, right? Our homes and our lives are not meant for the long-term respectful care of cremated remains. And at some point, they're going to be put in the park or put in the water or thrown in the garbage or whatever, forgotten. It just does. It's not a real solution. Okay, let's keep going. We're moving quickly because I want to keep time for the other parts of our program. People say that, the assimilation is less traditional. People do less traditional things. Absolutely. And it's just, cremation is kind of like a fad today. So people just kind of follow, the norm of what they hear and what they see. I hope it's okay, rabbis. I'm not wearing a tie for you right now. I used to travel around when I was on the circuit until COVID, and I would always, dress up. Here, it's like, like I'm in my home office and it's 5 in the morning. I'm just, I only wear a tie now once a week generally. Friday nights, which is not far from me. It's in like 7-8 hours. So Friday nights, our synagogues have been closed here in Israel, basically closed for almost a year. Up and open, close, 5 people, 10 people maximum. So on Shabbat we have services in my parking lot upstairs, and it's the only time on Friday night do I actually wear a tie. The rest of the week I don't. And my kids are always complaining about my ties. I forget if it's my ties are too wide or my ties are too thin, right? It's like, they're not in style. And I have 5 teenagers, guys, okay? 5 teenagers. Give me some love, people. 5 teenagers, okay? So why do I not get rid of my ties? Because and I know that in 5 years, these ties are going to be back in, right? Fads come and fads go. Ties are wide, ties are thin, ties. That's how you're going to choose what to do with your body. Because this is just what's in the news today and what people, this is some things you should think about, right? That's why we're here tonight. Go to a lecture, read a book, whatever it's going to be, think about it. Just because other people are doing it, I don't know if that's the way to make big decisions in life. The other reason that people talk about, there's a few people that mentioned sort of quick and easy. I'll tell you, I was always into the positive subjects I mentioned before, raising kids, love being Jewish, and grandkids, and passing on Judaism, and relationships and marriage and things like that. And then how did I get into this subject? Make a long story short, I was in Florida about 10 years ago on a speaking tour, and I opened up a Jewish newspaper, and there's an ad in a Jewish newspaper from a Jewish funeral home offering Jewish cremations, and I was in shock. I'm a traditional Jewish boy from Montreal, Canada. And listen, I grew up and there's all different types of Jews, and some do more and some do less, and some do this and some do that. But there were some just like absolutes that all Jews did. Like growing up, everybody knew that Jews do not play World Series baseball on Yom Kippur. That's a given, right? Everybody knew that Jews do not pay full retail price. Okay, that's a given. And everybody knew that Jews don't cremate, right? It was just it was a generation after the Holocaust. It was just not done, right? So I was in shock when I saw this ad, and going back 10, 12 years. And I started researching it. And I spent about 3 years researching. That the result was my book and my talks on the subject. I want to share with you the biggest surprise in my research, right? Because I knew nothing about the subject before. I always assumed that cremating a body was something like using a microwave oven. Put the thing in, press the button, 3 minutes later it comes out, maybe already in an urn, I don't know, right? Sorry guys, it's going to be a little unpleasant to hear this, but it's important. Typical thin person today. Remember when we were thin before COVID? The COVID-19, the 19 pounds, whatever they talk about. I don't know about you, but this last year has done a number on my weight. But if you're a thin person, it takes 60 to 90 minutes to convert, to cremate, right? For a heavier person, like many of us, it's 2 to 3 hours. For someone who's technically obese, that's a BMI of 30 or above, right? It's 3 to 4 hours. During that time, the body is not placid and calm and spiritual. The muscles are contracting and expanding. Brain is sizzling. It's a very unpleasant thing. It's neither quick nor clean. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that burial is pleasant, okay? It's not. I remember high school lab, okay? Decomposition's gross. But I will tell you, they're both kind of gross. And get this, burial is the natural way of every living thing. A plant grows, blossoms, goes back to Mother Earth. An animal is born, runs around the forest, goes back to Mother Earth. Burial is natural. Cremation is an artificial, man-made grasp at control. It's neither quick nor easy, and it's not natural. Let's do a few more points, and then I want to switch and go over to the reasons that people get into, that reason why people go to burial, why Jews have gone to burial, right? So we talked about misinformation, conformity. We talked about the environmental reasons. We talked about transporting, certainly, transporting it. I mean, it's certainly easier to take an urn, but on the other hand, you got to burn the body. Ignorance, right? So when you go through the reasons, oh, so somebody said tattoos, right? So my grandmother used to say it's a bubba mice. You know that phrase, the Yiddish phrase bubba mice? Bubba is a grandmother, and mice is like a story. So my grandmother used to say, it's a bubba mice. There's no law about person having a tattoo not being allowed in a Jewish cemetery. It's just not true. My grandmother would say that, some grandmother didn't want her grandkids to get tattoos and so made it up to scare them. It's not true. So we do believe that the body is holy and we're not into tattoos, but it doesn't prevent the person being in a cemetery when their time comes. By the way, somebody also in the chat mentioned suicide. Theoretically, that's actually closer to the truth. Theoretically, a person who commits suicide is considered guilty of murder, right? Murdering themselves is no different than murdering someone else, and they shouldn't be in a Jewish cemetery. But that's a theoretical deterrent. It's not a practical one. The rabbis say that we know that 99.99999% people commit suicide. They had mental health issues. They should have had therapy. They should have had medication. They regret it, whatever it is. And they are buried in Jewish cemeteries. That's the historical rule. It's a theoretical point. It's not a practical point. So those aren't real issues. When you go through it, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll get back to more if I missed any, when you go through the reasons that people choose cremation today, one by one, we just went through, I think, the top 10. They're simply not true. Fake news, as the modern phrase calls it, misinformation. It's not better for the environment, doesn't solve mobility problems, but it's not quick and clean, right? There's only one reason, actually, that is undeniable. There is one reason people choose cremation today that is undeniably true. What is it, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think? Ellie, you're saying it with your phrase exactly right. In 9 out of 10 cases, cremation is cheaper than burial, often significantly so, where a burial can end up costing $8,000, $10,000, $12,000. Cremations are usually a few, 2, 3, 4, start to finish. Sometimes less, do a 1-800 number. Now, you and I both know that if you plan this out over the years, it's a Starbucks every couple of days. Like it's not a big difference in the long term, right? But if you leave it to the end, and it's a $5,000 or $6,000 difference or whatever, so that's the real reason. So now we've discussed the reasons why people choose cremation. We've gone through them and saying they're really not true. It's not better for the environment. It's not this. But why is it worth the extra money? Gentlemen, when you proposed to your beloved and you gave her a ring, I assume you did not get the ring from the bottom of a Cracker Jack box, right? You actually put some money into it. So I'm going to try and explain, according to my understanding, why Jews have focused on burial, why it's worth the extra bucks. There's a ton to talk about. We do not have time. I'm going to give you some headlines. But I encourage you, if you want more information, we have questions and comments after. You have wonderful rabbis to talk to as your resource. I'll give you some other resources for those who are interested. Okay, let's get into it. Why have Jews throughout the years focused on burial? Roman historian Tacitus, when he described us to his compatriots, he said as one of the defining characteristics, he said the Jews bury rather than burn the dead. This has stood out throughout history. Why? Well, number one, Rabbi Ephraim Oshry, rabbi in World War II, put in the Kovno ghetto, survived the war incredibly, moved to New York, and actually and told the following story. He said one day he's in the ghetto and a Nazi officer barges in, slams the door behind him, blonde hair, blue eyes, and the rabbi thinks he's about to be killed. And the Nazi soldier starts speaking to him in perfect Yiddish. Rabbi, I'm a Jew. I have fake papers. I look the part. This is how I'm surviving. But I'm a very sick man. And I know what they're going to do to me when I pass. They're going to bury me in a Nazi cemetery with a Nazi cross over my body, surrounded by Nazis forever. I could do this for a few months to survive, but I can't be there for eternity. Rabbi, am I allowed to be cremated to avoid that fate? And Rabbi Oshry responded, my dear, dear child, no, you can't. What they do to us against our will, we have no control over. But a Jew must do whatever he or she can to have proper Jewish burial. In normal times, that means a Jewish cemetery, That means the rabbis saying the prayers. That means a little bit of earth from the land of Israel is put on the grave. That means the Chevra Kadisha Burial Society is preparing the body. That's normal times. In the middle of World War II, the rabbi explained, it means, but you must at a minimum try to avoid cremation, even if it means being buried in a Nazi cemetery. And he quoted verse after verse, Talmudic reference after Talmudic reference, Maimonides, Code of Jewish Law. We sometimes think that Jews and burial, it's kind of like bagels and lox. Yeah, that's what Jews did, but okay, you can do whatever you want. It's not bagels and lox, guys. This is actually a huge mitzvah, a central part of our religion. If I was creating a religion, I don't really think I would care too much about what happens to dead bodies. But our tradition does. It is all over the Torah, all over the Bible. Abraham buries Sarah. Hebron, we still visit it today. God buries Moses. Abraham is buried. Rachel is buried. Jacob is buried. A huge amount of ink is put on this subject, which is fascinating. I mean, Yom Kippur is like 2 lines. The laws of Shabbat are like, and burial is all over the place. Surprisingly important in our religion. Furthermore, when a new Jewish community is being formed, you know what they're supposed to do first? What are the first things that the Jewish community is supposed to take care of? A Jewish school for kids, build a mikvah, a ritual bath, and Hevra Kadisha, set up proper Jewish burial. It's one of the most important things a Jewish community is supposed to do. And this ethic has gone down through the generations. You guys recognize the name Gilad Shalit? I see some people nodding, right? He's that poor Israeli soldier. He was kidnapped by Hamas. He was held in a Gaza dungeon for about 5 years. And a number of years ago, we made an exchange for him. We exchanged 2,000 terrorists to get him out. By the way, we're all happy that he's out. He just got married or something, I heard. Thank God he's doing okay. But it was a very controversial decision. Over 200 of those terrorists have already been rearrested for new terrorist crimes. Not simple to do that kind of thing, right? Most people have heard the story, though. You may not have heard another story that several times in Israel's history, we have traded hundreds of live terrorists to get back dead bodies and give them proper Jewish burial. You can be for or against that decision, by the way. It's not a simple decision. I'm just pointing out we do it. The first reason Jews are so focused on burial, this is a surprisingly important part of who we are as Jews, of our tradition of Judaism. It's not just bagels and lox. Number 2, anybody here ever been to a Jewish funeral and seeing the tradition of tearing kriya? You know what that is, tearing kriya? It's actually a double phrase, right? Kriya in Hebrew means tearing. So the translation is kind of tearing a tear, right? So the close relatives, the mourners at the time of the burial, the garment, the outer garment is torn. By the way, there's a modern equivalent I've seen more and more. I don't know if this is happening in California, where the funeral home gives a little ribbon to the mourners and then cuts the ribbon. Have you seen this? Does it exist by you? Listen, it's coming from a good place. The intentions are good. I just want to point out, that is not the point of the tradition. The point of the tradition is not that somebody gives me a ribbon and I cut it and it announces I'm the mourner. That's not the point. The point is it's my garment. It's my dress. It's my jacket. And I'm sitting there for the whole time during Shiva. I am torn. It's real. It's painful. So I want you to imagine the following scenario. When a person dies, Mother Earth tears kriya. A wound is opened up in the fabric of the earth. It is not okay. It is not normal. It hurts. It's supposed to hurt. But then, slowly, calmly, lovingly, the community, family, friends, lower the body into the hole in the ground. Earth is placed on top of it. Healing begins. Life does go on, but there is always a headstone. There is always a scar. The person is not forgotten. They have made a difference. The point is that the earth tears Kriya. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead, need the funerals, need the cemeteries. There are two modern attitudes towards death, which at first sound opposite, but I find remarkably similar. Number one, people are uncomfortable with death, so they want to speed it up. That's cremation. Just get it over with. And don't do 7 days of Shiva, do 3 days, do 1 day, do an afternoon, just do a memorial service. Get it over with. I don't like this. Fast as possible. Somebody once called this the toilet assumption, meaning it's an unpleasantry. So just flush it, get rid of it, right? The other attitude is, I don't like this death stuff. I want to fight it. That's embalming. That's metal caskets. That's above ground mausoleums. They still decompose, it just lasts a little longer. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to delay it. Some people want to speed it up. Some people want to slow it down. What Judaism says is 6 days a week, you were active building a life. 7th day, I'm not in control. Your whole life you're building, but your last statement on planet Earth, I'm not going to speed it up. I'm not going to slow it down. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to accept it. It's a beautiful attitude to life and death. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead. Death denial is not healthy. The Jewish system is honest and cathartic and healthy. Number 3, have you ever noticed this correlation between belief in God and burial? It's actually fascinating. There's exceptions and variations to every rule, but just think about it. What countries have the highest cremation rates? Far East, belief in many gods. Atheist, post-Christian Europe today, right? Belief in no God. Versus people who believe in God, one God, they have higher burial rates by far. Just think about it, by the way. The Middle East, Islam, they got it from us. No cremation in Islam. Different versions of Christianity. Historic Catholicism didn't allow it for 1,500 years. They changed about 50 years ago. Eastern Orthodox don't allow it. Judaism, honestly, got it from Judaism, right? There's only one crematorium in the state of Israel, very small, services basically the Russian non-Jewish population here, although it's making inroads, but it's still 1%, 2%, it's nothing. And even in America, by the way, the Bible Belt versus the secular coasts, like it's an interesting correlation. That belief in God belief in one God leads to much higher burial rates. There's a lot of literature as to why. I have a very simple theory. My theory is because the Bible, the Torah, says every human being is created in the image of God. Now, that doesn't mean that God is physical. God forbid, he's not. It means that our image is some kind of divine imprint. You don't mess with that divine image. You treat it gently. When you were 8 years old and your beloved pet dog Spot died, I can virtually guarantee that your mother did not say, okay, honey, you bring the dog's body over and I'll fire up the barbecue. Like, she didn't say that, did she? What did she say? Okay, you bring over the dog and we'll bury it in the backyard. Because get this, guys, we bury things we love. We bury treasure. We burn the garbage. Isn't it fascinating? Just think about it. Remember Hurricane Katrina, when those shuls were, the synagogues were flooded, and there were a ton of like Torah scrolls that were destroyed beyond repair. If a Torah scroll is damaged, Sefer Torah, Torah scroll is damaged, you bring it to the sofer, to the scribe, and they fix it. What do you do if it's irreparable? You bury it. Public ceremony, they buried it. So get this, guys. You are holier than a Torah scroll. You bury a Torah scroll, you bury treasure, but you are holier. By the way, I'll give you a simple way of understanding it. A Torah scroll is the holiest object that we have. And if God forbid there's a fire at the local Chabad, rabbis, just God forbid as a hypothetical, God forbid there's a fire at the local Chabad, Are you allowed to risk your life to save the Torah scroll? Now, if you can get in there safely, the fireman says, yeah, no problem. If you can get in there safely and get the Torah scrolls, of course, go and do it. But if there's any risk, any reasonable risk to your life, you're not allowed to go and save the Torah scrolls. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you're old or you're young, you're healthy or you're sick, you're more observant or less observant. You are holier than a Torah scroll. We bury a Torah scroll when it's damaged beyond repair, and we bury a body. One final idea, and then we'll move to questions and comments. Raise your hand if you have ever visited a Jewish convent or a Jewish monastery. Raise your hand if you've ever visited a Jewish convent or a Jewish monastery. That was a trick question, guys. Sorry. There aren't any. Think about it. Why is that? I mean, what, you think that like Catholics are stupid? And they're not stupid. Right? They're intelligent just like we are. Right? Ask a Catholic, who's the holiest person on planet Earth? They'll probably say the Pope. Celibate, right? Not a coincidence. Nuns and priests celibate. Why is that? Well, they have a philosophy. The philosophy is, if you want to be spiritual, you want to go up to God, then you have to deny the physical. By the way, Eastern mystics, different religion, are also abstinent for this reason, right? On this point, they agree. It's either or. Spirituality, want to reach up, then deny the physical. The body is bad, right? What do we say about the body? We say the exact opposite. God is a good God that created a good physical world, and our bodies are good. My body is not my enemy. It is my soul's partner, right? You have to the rider on the horse, not the horse on the rider. But I couldn't, like Shabbat, you have good food. You're supposed to have a beautiful, intimate life with your spouse. I mean, I couldn't give charity without my tzedakah, without my body. So no wonder that the body and the soul are partners. And when the body, it's time to go, the soul does not just forget about its partner. Imagine a woman that comes back from the cemetery. She just buried her husband of 50 years. She takes off her black dress, puts on a red party dress, and goes out to the clubs looking for a new guy that very night. Does it sound normal to you? Of course not, right? When you have a partner, you don't just move on that quickly. Body and soul are partner. The soul, in our tradition, God didn't just create us and not give us any instructions or any indication, right? Parents try and teach their kids, just like give birth and walk away, right? So God taught us, a lot what we need to know. And one of the teachings that we have is that when the body dies, the soul stays with it. It is very concerned. It wants its body to be properly buried. It goes back and forth from the burial place to the Shiva house. And that step is really important as the soul progresses on to the next world. So ladies and gentlemen, we've only touched the surface here. I want to keep time for questions and comments. We started out with the realization that more people today are choosing cremation. We went through the reasons that people are choosing cremation. We didn't do them all, but I think we did most of them. We can get back to any things we missed. And as you go through the reasons that people choose cremation, it's startling how weak they are. Not better for the environment, doesn't solve mobility problems, which because other people are doing it, I'm going to do it. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's only really one reason that does make sense. Cremation is generally cheaper. I've tried to make a case for how I understand, we don't have time to get into everything, there's a lot more, but why have Jews throughout history been so insistent on burial? Some of the reasons that we discussed, why it's worth the extra money. Some of the reasons we discussed. It's a core part of our tradition, our religion. It's not a minor thing. This is really carried through. The body is a treasure. We bury treasure. So we bury a Torah scroll, we bury a body. We burn the garbage. The earth itself tears Kriya. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead, need the cemetery, need the experience, need the burial. It's unhealthy to be in death denial. We talked about the soul, how the soul needs it going on. One more final idea, and then we'll open it up. I don't know where I got this from, but I have the following monologue in my head, where this older Jewish guy calls together his kids and says, kids, I have something important to tell you. Just listen for a minute. I want it to be clear, okay? I may not have been the best Jew on planet Earth. There were some things I did, some things I didn't do. Looking back, maybe I do things differently, I don't know. But there's one thing I do know. I was born a Jew. I'm proud to be a Jew. And when I die, I want my final statement on planet Earth to be, here lies a proud Jew. I want everything to be done correctly. I want the little bit of earth from the land of Israel. I want the rabbi to say the prayers. I want the funeral society, the burial society, Chaver Kedisha, to prepare the body. I want it done right so that my final statement on planet Earth should be, here lies a proud Jew. I don't know about you, but to me, I find it very touching. Thank you for listening and thank you for coming. It's not an easy topic. We can, I think, open it up. Rabbi, you want to do it through the chat, or how do you want to do it, rabbis, for questions and comments, anything that people want to share?
Yes, Rabbi Meir, you want to take it away? You're going to.
Sure. I think the best way is a lot of people. So maybe later right now, I think everybody should post their questions and we'll select a few of them. Hopefully some are similar. So then we get to one stone. I do want to ask you one thing myself. First of all, I unfortunately do officiate at a lot of funerals here. And the conversation does come up. Part of the reason I do so many is because Rabbi Eli from Chabad of Northridge is a Kohen. And so I do for him as well. So I would say I'm a little bit involved here in a lot of these conversations that happen. So it's my community, all, the whole area here. But you said very well. You said that everything is you seem the only real reason is money, and that's true. By the way, that's true. A lot of your other reasons, I don't even hear them in conversations. But I could imagine some people are thinking about it. Maybe the pre-planners who are doing that. But I think also, do you think part of it is because it's easier? People feel like it's just easier. I don't want to arrange a funeral. I don't know who's going to come. I don't know who's not going to come. Like, it's not about they don't have the money. It's just like they can't deal with it, so they do that. Like, because I tell people, I'll pay for it. And like, whatever.
It's definitely, it's a good point. There's a certain, there's a guy that I want to meet. He lives in Michigan. His name is Thomas Lynch. The best combination of jobs I've ever heard. I mean, best, most interesting. He is a undertaker. He's a Christian. He has a funeral home, and he's a prize-winning poet. Like literally prize-winning poet. A good combination, right?
That's what you do.
So he wrote a poem. He's interesting. I'd love to meet him. So he wrote the following, and he wrote a book on the subject, and he said that many people say, I don't want to be a burden on my kids. Just like, whatever burden, like make it easier for them. They're gonna have to arrange the funeral, have to fly in and have to, come and visit them. And he said beautifully, he said, if my child, he's thinking about himself, if I can't spend a few days giving final respect to my parent, if you can't be burdened by that, what can you be burdened by? In other words, this is like the final, like, as a child, the final goodbye. I mean, that's like the ultimate. So you're right. It is easier to call a 1-800 number. Okay, they pick up the body from the morgue, they deliver it a week later, or now with COVID, it's very delayed, but normally it takes a week or two. It'll come in a little cardboard urn, or you can upgrade and you can get a nice one. It's delivered to your door, and you can do an online or memorial service whenever you want. And you're right. It's easier. But you know what? It's not that hard to arrange a funeral. Millions of people have been doing it for thousands of years, right? You don't have to have the fanciest funeral. Not everybody has to come. Zoom has changed things because people can just get online. It's not that hard.
Right.
Just like, by the way, I'll give you a similar, and I don't have an agenda, I'm not pushing anything, but like, people say, oh, like I respect keeping kosher, but it's too hard. So, I mean, okay, 50 years ago, I hear that. Today,
right.
Are you kidding me? Half the food in the supermarket is kosher, right? It has been proven to be healthier in a million different ways. So if you want to tell me you don't want to keep kosher, that's up to you. But don't tell me it's so hard. Okay, like millions and millions of people are doing it. It's not hard at all, right?
Right.
You know, you call up the Chabad rabbi, he kashers your kitchen, takes him an hour or two, and after that, so again, I'm not on an agenda. We're not talking about kosher here. I'm just pointing out that is it harder? It's a little bit harder, but it's not a big deal. I don't know if that helps you at all, Ramir.
No, it does. I didn't mean so much easier as in, I want to hear questions. If anybody wants to post questions on the chat, am I up to date on the chat? I think so.
I'm looking now if there's any questions.
Mary, I sent you a few questions. I don't know if you saw your chat.
No, there's no messages in the chat. You sending me private messages?
I see that it's right now. It's only the hosts in the chat, which is strange.
No.
It should be everybody there.
I just sent Rabbi Shalom a message. Hi, and please send me send it back to me. There you go. So here's a question coming up from somebody. How does one inspire choice of funeral when someone was born Jewish and has then later in his life been affected by Eastern religious, which says that the soul survives and the body dies, and the person doesn't care or respect? I mean, basically, I guess the question, the key person doesn't care or respect about Judaism at this point. What would you tell that?
Rabbi Rifkin from Northridge, I know there's a couple here, Rabbi Rifkin, you know, we've talked a lot about this over the years because I've spoken for your community, and I always have like a pet peeve, and I'm coming back to your question very, very quickly. Yeah. Pet peeve is that, like, you know, Jewish education for a lot of people stops at bar bat mitzvah. So then you ask somebody who's in their 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, and like they're not very impressed by Judaism, right? They may know a lot about the world and be involved in politics and whatever, and Judaism just doesn't seem like it's a bunch of Bible stories, right? So what's the explanation? It's because the last time you actually learned about it, you were 12 years old. Of course, it's not going to be impressive, right? So, so it's the same thing. Like people, if they, you know, we're impressed by certain external things. Let me ask you a question, okay? And we're supposed to respect every human being, and every human being is in the image of God, and 100%. But like, we do have a certain attitude and philosophy. I mean, Judaism is different, right? And we should know about our own, you know, traditions as much or more as the others. So let me ask you a question, okay? In Judaism, what purifies, fire or water? Think about it, guys. In Judaism, what purifies, fire or water?
Fire.
Water. Think about it, okay? The baby in the womb, right? A mikvah. The Torah is compared to water. Water is alive, is flowing, right? You have, by the way, I'll even tell you, I don't know if people realize this. I didn't know until I got into it. You know that the preparation for of the funeral society, the burial society of a dead body, they put the dead body in a mikveh. Yeah. I don't know if people realize that. It's part of the tahara, the preparation. The first time I went, I want to tell you, when I was researching this book, I'd never gone before, and I joined Rabbi Zone, who's like the rabbi's rabbi of this kind of stuff. He's in New York, and I joined him at a tahara in the middle of the night in New York somewhere. And I want to tell you, ladies and gents, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. I know that sounds strange. There's a dead body there. I'm a very straight rationalist, kind of like, I'm not into spooky stuff. Like, I felt the holiness. It is an unbelievable, the love, the respect, the soul, right? The body is water, is purifying. Fire destroys in Jewish thought. It would burn the idols, right? We're not trying to destroy. It's a fascinating thing. So yes, we have a divergent view from the Eastern religions on this and on many things. Obviously, individuals are individuals, and we have to respect.
Right. But ultimately, we need to you know, dig and focus on our own religion. But I had some really good questions here. Like, really, I'm reading through them, and I want to get direct answers to these questions. Number one, if a parent, this is such a good question. I don't know who asked it. It's forwarded to me. It's fine. If a parent says they wanted this, but the son or spouse, by the way, this happened to me, a spouse says, Rabbi, I want to listen to you, but because I know what you're saying and I'm following Judaism and everything, but my parent or my loved one, they want this. And isn't it important to follow them? And how could I live with myself if I don't listen to them? You understand the question? Of course.
I get the question. It's a great question.
It
By
is.
the way, I find this is the hard part of life, by the way. In other words, deciding between like doing something good and doing something that's clearly bad. Like, I mean, we all have our good days and our bad days and our successes and our failures, but like, it's pretty clear. Am I going to murder? No. Okay. The tough parts in life are when you have two things that seem both right. Which do you do? Burial or listen to a parent, right? So like this. By the way, keep in mind, we are the people that we're privileged to share the mitzvah of listening, to one's parents, honoring one's parents, right? So we're the ones who taught that to the world. And yet, ladies and gents, there's an exception to the rule. I will give you a funny kind of an example. I don't mean to downgrade the question, but funny kind of example. The deceased left in their will that at the Shiva house, they want everybody to eat bacon double cheeseburgers.
Right. It's a good example.
So we don't do that, right? Just because they say something, we don't go against Judaism. So how does it fit like this? Okay, when am I closer to God? When is my knowledge deeper and truer? Now, when I am in this crazy world with all of our distractions and notifications and everything, or after 120 when I'm upstairs? I have a lot more clarity then, right? I mean, we're here to bring God into the world. This is our job, but the clarity is there. So why did the person ask to be cremated? The loved one, the spouse, the parent, why did they ask to be cremated? In 99% of cases, it was because the misinformation we talked about before, right? Thought it was better for the environment, didn't want to be a burden, or they just didn't understand. But if they knew what they know now, if they knew, no, I want this. Your soul wants this, right? Right now, this is what they want. So this is an exception to the rule, where we are digging down and saying, deep down, what did the person really want? I know that physically they asked for this, but they asked for this based on misinformation. Misinformation about the environment, misinformation about what's important to me, misinformation about my relationship to God, misinformation about you. And deep down, they really wanted me to do the right thing. And this is the right thing.
So it's almost
That's,
like
I think, the proper attitude.
Almost like it's in a weird way, almost like what you call tough love when you do to your child something that they perhaps are asking not to do. And in a weird way, you're doing that to your parent. You're saying, it's just,
I never made the connection, but you're right.
Like when you're okay, there's so many good questions. I want to go through them quickly. So there's a question about burials one on top of the other, right? Is that a problem in Judaism? Very popular here in California. Speaking about money, by the way, I think if you buy two and people feel connected, is that a problem in Judaism?
Okay, so it's a great question. For those who have been to Israel in the last number of years, you may have noticed this as you drive into Jerusalem. There's the main Jerusalem cemetery. The historic holiness Jewish cemetery in Jerusalem is the Mount of Olives, but that's almost full. That's thousands of years old, prophets and things. But the one I'm talking about is on the entry into Jerusalem on the right. It's called Resting Hill, Har Menuchos. And there is a multi-layered section of the cemetery, right? They're digging into the mountain. It's kosher. There's rabbis doing it, okay? There's no halachic problem with it whatsoever, right? They're digging into the mountain, even extending the mountain. So the person is buried in the earth, attached to the ground, but there's layers on top, almost like a parking lot, right? I want to tell you that I hate it. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. Okay, why? By the way, there's no religious Jewish problem with it.
Okay? That's a very clear. It's a very clear answer. It's not any problem.
Why do I hate it? Because it gives the impression that we have a land problem. And we don't have one. I live in Israel. Everybody thinks Israel is so crowded. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a tour guide. Israel is not crowded. Between Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, up to Haifa, Israel is very crowded. Have you been to the middle of the country? I live in Beit Shemesh area. Have you been down to the Negev? Have you been to the Galil, the Golan, never mind Yehuda and Shomron? I mean, this country is empty. There's plenty of land. So it's the same thing. There is no technical problem doing that. In various historical periods, they did it. In Prague, if anybody's been to the old Jewish cemetery in Prague, in the Czech Republic, it's the famous one with the pictures where the tombstones are like this, right? They're like, and so they say, why did they do that? Well, because the non-Jews were not letting us bury elsewhere. So that's what they did. They would dig under and they would bury. So there's no halachic problem. And if there's a reason, that you want the cemetery to be closer to home, it's running out of room, there's no problem doing it. But there's no need to do it either. There's plenty of cemeteries and plenty of room around. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, here's another question. You brought this up earlier. It does help. So basically, just to answer very clearly, Rhonda, I think, asked that question, and it's a good question. The double plots, it's not a problem. It's not a halachic problem. You don't like it. It's not a good messaging. I understand that, but it's not any problem at all. But okay, moving along. People want to delay buying their burial plot. This is people worried you buy it too early. Does that mean your life is ending or something like that? Is there a proper age, and is there a problem buying it early?
Okay.
So that
I will tell you exactly my personal view. And again, I'm going to give you some resources. I'll just mention them now. I'm going to get to your question, but some resources. Again, I'm not going anywhere, but your main resource to talk about this kind of stuff is your Chabad rabbi. That's what they are there for, and they are wonderful. Chabad.org, by the way, which has a tremendous amount of material on this and every Jewish subject. On this subject, actually has me in a video and a few articles and things like that. It's got a lot of other people on the subject. There is, and I'll put into the chat right now, there's another website. If you need a quick sort of intro for somebody, there's another site that was put up by a friend of mine that has my material and other people's material. It's called peacefulreturn.org. Got a top 10 list, it's got a short video, it's got a bunch of neat stuff on this subject. Peacefulreturn.com or .org, same thing. My book on the subject is called Cremation or Burial, A Jewish View. You can get it at mosaicapress.com or on amazon.com, of course. And my name is there, it's Doron Kornbluth. So, okay, that's just the resources and where to look, after. Back to your question. But Mary, I lost my train of thought.
That's a good age, and is it good?
Good. That's what I was, okay. So when should a person buy a plot? Okay. Right. My answer is very simple: today. And let me explain why. Okay. Judaism gives a counterintuitive teaching. It's actually taught that making the preparations and buying the plot are a segula, it's called an omen for a long life. It's not the opposite. It's not taboo. It works in the opposite way. Meaning when you're preparing to do it right, and I want to say personally, right, why I'm a big fan of pre-planning and prepaying. By the way, I don't get a commission, okay? It's not a financial thing, but I'm a big fan of pre-planning and pre-buying, and I'll explain exactly why, okay? I have met so many people that I knew, and the Chabad rabbi knew, and they knew they wanted a proper Jewish burial with everything, the Chevra Kadisha and the rabbi saying the prayers, but it wasn't written down, and 30 years ago they said something else, or they wrote something else down, or they're married to a non-Jew, or their kids are cheap, or whatever it's going to be. And what's in writing is in writing. And you and I both know, the rabbis tell me, Doron, this guy was putting on tefillin beside me in my Chabad house for 20 years. There is no doubt he wanted a proper Jewish burial. But I lost. Get it in writing. Get it clearly in writing, right? You have it. You have it in your wallet, you have it in your living will, you have it in your final will and testament, you have it cleared everywhere. When my time comes, hopefully not for a long time, we're not rushing anywhere, guys. When my time comes, right, here's the Chabad rabbi's name, here's his phone number, here's his Instagram, all final decisions go through him, right? He decided everything. I want everything done also prepay it. By the way, in some places that makes a lot of sense financially. In some places, it doesn't necessarily. I don't care. Even if it costs you an extra few $100s.
Also,
why?
Right.
It's emotionally. I have seen so many families that are torn apart by this. Mm-hmm. A time of grief like this should be a time where the family comes together. Not when the kids are arguing about their inheritance and trying to save a buck. okay? They've gotten plenty from you over the years, right? They'll survive without the extra $5,000. You do it now. That way, when the time comes, everything is decided, everything is clear. This is your body, your life being done in your way. Your requests are done, and that way the family can come together. It can be a time of healing, not a time of division. So that's my attitude towards the subject.
That's good. That's good. So the earlier the better, and very, very short. Doron, so others think that it's perhaps a very good idea to be buried in Israel. Israel is a holy place. Is it a mitzvah? Is it a bad thing if you're not buried in Israel, in the Holy Land?
It's certainly not a bad thing to be buried. There's great rabbis and great Rebbitzins and great simple Jews throughout history are buried all over the world. There's no problem whatsoever. That being said, even in the Talmud, there are many cases of them bringing the body to Israel. The famous case of the matriarchs, the patriarchs, people go down into Egypt, and they promise, and Moses takes the bodies out of Joseph, right, that they're brought back and buried in Israel. So there is a certain important value being buried in Israel. It is the Holy Land. It purifies. So, by the way, it's not actually, when you add it up, it's not actually much more expensive at all as being buried in most places in the States. You have to pay for the flight, but on the other hand, it's a cheaper thing here to begin with. There is a cemetery here for Americans, not far from me. I'm in the Beit Shemesh area, called Eretz Chaim. Chabad rabbis will help you, find it. You can arrange it. You can prepay it. You can pre-plan it. So all things being equal, I think it's a great thing, and Judaism thinks it's a great thing to be buried in Israel. But it's certainly not bad. I mean, there's no. All of my family is buried in America, and that's normal because that's where the family is, and people want to visit, and that's where you spent your life. But all things being equal, if you feel a connection to the land of Israel, please do it. My in-laws are bought here.
Right. It does say actually that when Mashiach comes and there'll be a resurrection, you're a little bit closer if you're in Israel. But of course,
so it's funny you mentioned that, Rabbi Meir. So the rabbis, I'm sure were thinking during my whole talk, they were thinking, yeah, we're bringing this speaker from Israel, and he speaks for an hour about cremation and burial. And this guy didn't mention the number one reason why our tradition insists on burial. The rabbis are laughing because they were probably thinking this. Rabbi Rifkin knows me, so I assume I had a little bit of a trust with you. But the number one reason why our tradition gives for burying, I didn't even mention. Resurrection of the dead, which you just mentioned. So let me just address it for a second. Why didn't I address it? I didn't address it because it sounds funny to a lot of people. You know what I think of when I intuitively, I'm not proud of this, but we're friends now. But you know what I think of intuitively when I hear Resurrection of the Dead? Michael Jackson's Thriller. Thriller. Remember the first great music video in 1980, 1981, right? The dead coming back to life, zombies. It sounds weird, guys. We believe in this? So the answer is yes. There's a lot of beautiful ideas that are, when you get back down to their core, they're beautiful ideas. We see them through Hollywood, so they seem weird. Just to give you a very simple example, okay? Voltaire once said, "It's no more of a miracle to be born twice than born once." Isn't that fascinating? At Masada, if those of you who've been to Masada, I used to take families there before COVID all the time. So at Masada, they found 2,000-year-old date pits. They extracted the DNA, and there's date palms growing down the street. Okay? The idea of the dead coming back to life simply means that DNA exists forever, unless you burn it out with cremation. DNA exists forever. And the physical body is good and has a role to play in the future. This is what it's all about. So do we fully understand it? No, I don't. I don't think anybody does, except you rabbis. Maybe you do. But the physical body is good. Physicality is good. And there is something happening in the future of the dead coming back. It's an interesting way of looking at such a difficult subject.
Some good questions here. So you said very good, actually, that resurrection is no bigger a miracle than being born. I think there was even once a conversation between a Roman emperor and Rabbi Yehuda or somebody else in the Gemara and the Talmud, and he said to him, "How do you believe in resurrection?" He said, "If you believe you can be born once, and the second time you're just creating somebody who was already here, it's not as big a deal." But we do daven and we say 3 times a day, "Mechayeh Mesim Berachamim Rabim," that God will resurrect the dead. But on that being said, even if you're in Israel and you're closer, of course, there were many tzaddikim throughout the generations who were buried outside of Israel, and it's just as good and just as big of a mitzvah to be buried anywhere. I wonder if you can address this, perhaps. If anybody else has any more questions, please post them. Post them to me directly. Post them to your rabbis. They can send them to me. Post it to everyone. It's fine. All fine. But a lot of people here, and this I believe in the crowd of 70 people that are watching right now, a lot of people here that have friends, that have relatives, that have spouses, parents, or whatever relation, that perhaps were not buried already. And they're listening to this whole thing and they're like, wow, it's really important to be buried. It's a mitzvah, and that's all good going forward. It's so important. It's important for resurrection. Does that mean, I guess, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, but I think we have to address it because a lot of people thinking this in their head, and somebody mentioning, does that mean that somehow they did something wrong and they're forever doomed or something because these people?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to surprise you in my answer. Believe it or not, Judaism is not into guilt. I know that seems funny with the Jewish guilt thing that we always joke about, but we're actually not into guilt. We're into, l'chaim, the future. So let me be very clear, okay? If your loved one or you chose cremation for your loved one, if the person was cremated, don't beat yourself up about it. We're not into guilt. You made a decision based on what you thought was the right thing to do, the best thing to do based on the information you had. We're not into Jewish guilt. You know what you do? Make a donation to the local Chabad in their memory. They didn't ask me to say that, but it's true. Go for it, right? And move on, okay? We're not into the past. Okay, you did what you thought was best. That's life. We're here to make future decisions and try and spread the word. So yes, if it happened, it happened. Okay, God will take care of it. People say, well, what about the victims of the Holocaust? Right? They were cremated. They're not going to get into the world to come. They're not going to have the proper. And the answer is God will take care of it. Don't worry. Okay. I personally think, I'm convinced that it's true for somebody who didn't know any better. Right? They're born Jewish on a Pacific island, never knew they were Jewish, and chose cremation. What are you blaming them for? Of course, God's going to take care of it. But we're supposed to make the best decisions that we can make,
right,
and as smooth as possible. So don't feel bad, don't be guilty, put a donation in their name and move on. People ask, by the way, like, what do you, how do you spread this like to your family, other people who aren't on the talk right now? So I suggest humbly that you use this as an excuse, right? That you say, I heard this guy from Israel speaking, and maybe you want to look into it. Forgive the plug, but you want to send them a copy of Cremation or Burial: A Jewish View from mosaicpress.com, from Amazon. Yeah, Amazon or mosaicpress.com. You can get this myOnChabad.org. I have a video of me speaking about this. There's a lot of other videos, doesn't have to be me. But say, listen, I don't want to butt into your life. I want to tell you what to do. But like, there was some information there that I didn't have, and maybe you want to think about it. By the way, I want to tell you something, okay? This subject is relatively easy unless it's the time of grief already. When the person's already gone, and when it's already written cremation in the will, and when there's 2 hours to decide, then it's hard. I deal with it. The rabbis here deal with it. But when you have a normal conversation with somebody, right? Most people are not heavily invested in cremation. How dare you suggest I don't cremate? No, people just think that's the better choice, and you can share information in a non-confrontational way, and usually they appreciate it. You're not going to lose any friends raising this topic. You're going to gain them. So that's my attitude. Try and spread the word a little bit.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Meaning, what happened. People did things without their knowledge that they had. But that doesn't mean that's all of life is like that. If you're going to keep yourself dragged down because of all those things, that's not going to. That's that, and you go forward and you try to make up for it by helping people, and guilt is not going to help you. You're very well said. Another question Mo asks. He asks,
you didn't mention make a donation to Chabad in their benefit.
You did a good job. You said it 3 times. so Mo asks.
I do not get a commission, although maybe I'll take one.
Well, it depends what we get. But anyways, Mo says a question. He says this is common in the United States where people. Our burials are a lot of our cemeteries, unless they're ultra Orthodox, a lot of them have mixed in them, Jews and non-Jews. Is this a problem in any way? And how important is it for someone to, should he drive for an hour to make sure that he's buried in a place which is fully only Jewish? Because it's a lot of times very hard here because
Okay, it's a great question, and I like to explain it, and and again, talk to your rabbis, and there's all different perspectives and levels. But I like to explain the way you asked me, so I'll give you how I understand it. Having cemeteries defined by faith communities is the norm in human history. Meaning, try and get a Christian to be buried in a Muslim cemetery. Good luck. Okay? Most religions today and throughout history have single religion cemeteries. If you think about it, by the way, even Catholics and Protestants bury in different cemeteries as the norm, right? Why is that? Okay, there's exceptions to every rule, I get that, but just think about it in a historical context, right? Sometimes like we look at what Judaism says and we don't realize, oh, this is common to a lot of people. Some things are very different for us and some things are not, right? So why is that? Well, the way I understand it, and I'm going to share a Jewish point of view, I don't know about the other religions, but the way I understand it, it's actually quite deep. The idea is that we are part of a community. Open up a siddur, a Jewish prayer book, and count the prayers and tell me how many of the prayers are in singular and how many are in plural. It's fascinating. To my knowledge, there are 2 prayers in the singular. The first thing you say in the morning, right? Moda ani lefanecha. And another prayer said Elokai neshama. Every other prayer in the book, just about, maybe I'm missing one, is in plural. Heal us, redeem us. It's amazing that we are so focused on a group. And the idea is that we don't believe that individual spirituality will get you where you have to go. It's important. My inner life is crucial. And sometimes a person is alone, they're alone. But life is meant to be lived as a community. And that's a long-term, eternal statement as well. By having a Jewish cemetery, we are defining that this is my community. I'm not against anybody else, but this is who I am. And that we share this identity together. And we share our fate together, right? Every once in a while, there's this like old cemetery somewhere in Eastern Europe that's desecrated. Right? The swastikas or the knockover tombs, graves. Statistically, there's millions of Jewish graves there, so it's not a huge number statistically, but it happens, and it really bothers me. Right? It's happened in the Ukraine a couple of years ago, and it really bothered me. And I was wondering, like, why is that bothering me? Now I've been to the Ukraine, but at the time, like, I hadn't been to the Ukraine. I don't speak Ukrainian. My family's not from the Ukraine. Okay, we're from Russia and Germany, and I realized. It's because we're part of something. It's a Jewish cemetery. This is my people. And that could have been my grave. So having a Jewish cemetery is actually important. And it doesn't matter to me how far the drive is. How often are you actually going to a cemetery? Okay, like if you're going every day, we got to talk. That's not normal, okay? How often do people go to a cemetery? Once a year, twice a year? I mean, so yeah, whenever possible, you want to be in you absolutely want to be in a proper Jewish cemetery that has all the traditional prayers, all the laws are kept correctly, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. It seems like we're going to get close to wrapping it up. That was very, very good, very interesting. A lot of information there. People should buy the book because it's information that you have to process. It's a big mitzvah. And yes, when a Jew gets buried the proper way, it's also an affirmation. He's affirming that he believes in the Torah. He believes in a future, in a resurrection. He believes in Mashiach. He believes in that this is not the end, but this is he's just following the Jewish law like he did his whole life, or like he didn't, but he's following the Torah like he's supposed to, and that's what he's doing. And yeah, that's what the Torah tells us to do in the beginning of Genesis. Afar ata vel afar tashuv. A man was made from dust, and dust he should return. And ultimately, that's the ultimate reason we do it, is because it's what Hashem said we should do, like any other mitzvah. And like we say, you're born once and you die once. So these are times you want to do it right. You know what I mean? So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a real pleasure.
I want to
thank you, Rabbi, for waking up so early in the morning to share with us. That's very powerful.
I'll tell you, it's much easier than the East Coast. On the East Coast, I have to wake up at like 2:30 in the morning. You know, here it's like, okay, wake up an hour early. It's okay. 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 Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you very
day.
much. Have a good Shabbos. And
Healthy.
thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
And we're looking
Thank you.
forward for further opportunities.
Okay, Rabbi.
Thank you.
That's all.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Rabbi Pinson,
Yeah, Michael, you wanted to say something?
real quick, you know, in his program, he said that the number one obstacle, perhaps, to a Jewish burial is the cost. So my question is directed that for those few Jews who cannot afford a proper burial, what resources do they have to get assistance so they do have a proper Jewish burial?
That's an excellent point, Michael. And here in Southern California, as well as probably most Jewish organized Jewish communities, there are funds available through federations, through your Chabads, through different organizations to help those who need assistance in enabling, making sure that they can get a proper Jewish burial. There are avenues out there, and there's ways where no one will be turned away due to lack of funds. So that's very important that you bring it up, 100%. And I think, again, the key is, you know, think about it now. Don't wait until the last moment when that's when the pressure comes, and that's when there's you know, lots of stress involved and lots of pain. Deal with it, you know, when you're healthy, God willing, and in the proper time. Don't leave the stress on your kids and those that are caring for you. Take care of it now. That's, I think, that one of the key important messages. Thank you for bringing that up, Michael. Okay, I just, you know, I'll mention, while still some of us are here, that we have a couple of further events with Chabad of South Bay, Chabad of Northridge coming up, Chabad of Red Rock. I believe it's March 6th will be the next monthly Hasidic Tales with Rabbi Zelig Rifkin from Chabad of New Orleans. That's going to come up on Saturday night, March 6th at 7:30 p.m. That's going to be I think our fourth monthly in the series of Hasidic stories. And coming up in middle of March, March 15th, we're going to have a very exciting event with Dimitri Salita. Dimitri Salita is known as the Star of David. He's a former welterweight champion. And he has a great story. There's a really incredible story how he advanced in the boxing ring and still staying strong in his Jewish identity and observance, keeping Shabbos, not fighting on Shabbos. Really a remarkable story. He'll be here with us on March 15th. So you can put that in your calendars for our next upcoming events together. Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. Of course, Purim in between.
And yeah, we got Purim coming up exactly a week from tonight. So I'm sure your local Chabad will send you all the info that you need to celebrate in our COVID 2020-21 world. Purim next Thursday night and Friday.
Okay. Good night.
Yes, good night. Happy
Thank you,
Purim,
everyone.
happy good Shabbos, and
Good Shabbos.
all good things.
Good
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, happy Purim, and very nice, Shalom, very nice.
Thank you for joining. Sei gesund, everyone.
Good
Be
night.
well.
Good night.